Hey guys, what's going on? I'm Combat Craig, and today we're talking about 3 sleep apnea conditions that you can file a claim for today. So you're thinking about filing a secondary sleep apnea claim, you go to your primary care doctor, you pass the means test, they measure your neck to see how thick it is. That's got to be something they came up with in the 50s. Then they ask you if you're a snorer and if you have restless leg syndrome. There's like a couple questions and you have to answer yes to a bunch of them. And then you get to the sleep study. There's 2 kinds of sleep studies for sleep apnea. I would go to the one at the sleep center where you go overnight and actually sleep there, and they hook up probes all over your body, but they have a one they send you as well. I would push for the actual sleep study on location. I think that's a better test. You're going to get more objective evidence. But if you can't get that one, you can win with the at-home test as well, but try to get it. So I think a lot of us go to the sleep study and then end up with a diagnosis of sleep apnea. They prescribe us the CPAP machine, and we have symptoms. So we have the diagnosis and the symptoms locked down and the CPAP machine. And if you have the CPAP machine, it's a 50% rating. You don't have to use it. They don't check to see how much you're using it for VA rating purposes. You just need the prescription for it. But where we get denied a lot is the nexus. So our nexus linking our current sleep apnea diagnosis to something that's already service connected on a secondary basis, that's where 95% of VA claims for sleep apnea get denied. Before I go over these 3 sleep apnea secondary conditions that are money claims, I want to remind you that I have a boot camp. If you want to reach out to me, you want to talk to me, my boot camp is the best way to get a hold of me, combatcraig.com. There's a couple things that you need to know about sleep apnea claims. One of them is what's known as the intermediate step. It's basically a step between your current diagnosis of sleep apnea and something that's always service connected. A lot of people will go to a doctor and get a nexus letter, and the nexus letter isn't written properly, and it just goes sleep apnea directly to tinnitus or something, and it doesn't address the intermediate step. Also, another thing that you need to be aware of is obesity. We've all gained weight since we're off active duty. You got to remember, the VA looks at this stuff as a direct service connection. So did you have a diagnosis of sleep apnea when you were 19? No, I didn't have sleep problems. Did you gain weight since you were 19? Yeah, I'm 53. I gained a lot of weight, and that's fluctuated. So they like to look at sleep apnea claims. They want to see a diagnosis on active duty service, and if you're still on active duty, go get a sleep study, because you probably already have it regardless of your age. Like I said, a lot more people have it than we know. So when your doctor writes your nexus for you, he needs to address the intermediate step and he needs to address obesity. He needs to address both of these things. Obesity is covered under 38 CFR 3.310. Service connection is not allowed for obesity on its own for sleep apnea secondary conditions, but it can act as an intermediate step to connect sleep apnea to a condition that's already service connected. So this is a combo of obesity and the intermediate step. Another example would be medications and their intermediate step. So there's various intermediate steps. They need to be addressed, and your nexus needs to be written properly. So when it comes to obesity, they do not allow service connection on its own. But when you're using obesity as an intermediate step, here's what you need to know. But basically what this is saying is the service-connected disability caused the veteran to become obese. So in this case, let's just use back. So your back is jacked, and it caused you to become obese because you don't move anymore. I have a jacked back. I take medications, and I don't move around. It's caused me to gain weight. That's the first part. Number 2 is the obesity was a substantial factor in causing the claim condition. So if I'm filing a claim for sleep apnea secondary to my lower back, they're going to be looking like, well, if he didn't have this lower back condition, would he still have gotten sleep apnea? Maybe, but you need to argue that I was fine. I didn't have sleep apnea problems. I didn't have obesity problems. my back got jacked up, started gaining weight because I can't move around and you guys are just popping pills all the time, right? So you have to say that obesity was a substantial factor because of your lower back. And then the third part is the claimed secondary disability, the sleep apnea, would not have occurred but for the obesity caused by the service-connected disability. So you need to address that too. You need to say that the sleep apnea wouldn't even have occurred in the first place if the lower back didn't occur in the first place, because you would have removed the obesity and the sleep apnea. So you want to address all three of those things. Links in the description to this document. That strategy, that's my boot camp. That's what I talk about. I preach it and I teach it. You need a doctor that can help you with a Nexus letter. Check out my med team. Here's an email address. Hit them up. Tell them you need a Nexus. All right, I want to make sure I teed it up for you guys. So let's go into sleep apnea secondary to sinusitis. Sinusitis is a condition where a person's sinuses become swollen and inflamed for 3 months or longer. Some of the symptoms are nasal inflammation, discharge from the nose, drainage down the back of the throat, pain, tenderness, swelling around your eyes, cheeks, or forehead, ear pain. It's all over the place. Fatigue, cough. Let's hop over to a BVA decision where a veteran won sleep apnea secondary to sinusitis. I encourage you to go to bva.va.gov and look these things up. Entitlement to service connection for sleep apnea to include as secondary to service-connected sinusitis. Finding of fact, the veteran has sleep apnea that is aggravated by a service-connected sinusitis. In April, the doctor related the veteran had been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea. The doctor opined, that means he's given an opinion because he's a doctor and he can, that the veteran's sinusitis, which he had in service, could have contributed to his sleep apnea because of resulting nasal obstruction. At the VA exam, the C&P exam, the veteran was again diagnosed with sleep apnea. The examiner reviewed the claims file, your VA claims file. You always need to review your VA claims file, and conducted a clinical evaluation of the veteran. The examiner concluded that it was less likely than not the veteran's sleep apnea was incurred or caused by service. This is the barrier that they use. Less likely than not means your claim is sunk. You want at least as likely than not, or more likely than not, or is due to. So after all this was unraveled, VA examiner provided a complete rationale for his opinion, and consequently the board finds that service connection for sleep apnea is warranted as secondary to service-connected sinusitis. You have to get into the law. You have to get into it enough to understand what's going on. You have to understand what's going on. Somebody's going to be arguing on your behalf. You need to know what they're arguing, why they're arguing it, and you should, it's worth spending the time doing this stuff. PTSD secondary to sleep apnea. PTSD is a mental health rating. I have other videos. I'll link to those in the description. But a common secondary for PTSD is sleep apnea secondary to PTSD. Let's hop over to another BVA decision. Entitlement to service connection for sleep apnea secondary to service-connected PTSD on a causation basis is granted. So we have aggravated by, or caused by, or is due to. So this is caused by. That's what causation means. Findings of fact. The evidence is at least evenly balanced as to whether the veteran picked this up because of PTSD or not. This is called equipoise. The tie goes to the runner on these. Although the June 2018 opinion and they started doing a doctor's initials here, is of minimum probative value because it uses ambiguous terminology, which is a joke because the rating criteria, as you read the CFR Part 4 of the Schedule for Rating Disabilities, it is nothing but ambiguous. It at least supports the conclusion that the veteran's sleep apnea is caused by a service-connected PTSD. So this is one of those things you don't want to run up there with a tie, but if you end up with a tie, you want to be able to win it. And here's an example of that. Check it out. And then we'll finish up with lower back conditions secondary to sleep apnea. We have lower back problems. We take medication for those problems. They cause us to gain weight. We don't move around, all that kind of stuff. So you can do a claim if you develop sleep apnea because of your lower back conditions. You can file a claim for sleep apnea secondary to lower back conditions. Service connection for sleep apnea as secondary and caused by service-connected lumbar spine disability is granted. And this is another causation one. As secondary and caused by a service-connected lumbar spine disability is granted. By resolving all reasonable doubt in the veteran's favor, his sleep apnea is caused by his medications, including muscle relaxers, for treating his service-connected lumbar spine disability. So this is the intermediate step of medications. Here the board finds that the August 2021 medical opinion is supported by clear rationale, which is consistent with and corroborates the June 17th VA treatment record. I'll hop in here. That's why you need to be consistent. Whatever your story is, dream one up, have one, don't change it, and make it consistent because they're going to be looking at your record, as well as the medical literature the veteran submitted to support his claim. He began to take medications for his back disability, and the board also finds that by resolving all reasonable doubt in the veteran's favor, which is how this is supposed to be, that's what reasonable doubt is supposed to be, but you have to go to the BVA for a while to argue this, maybe have a lawyer. His obstructive sleep apnea is caused by the medication he uses to treat his service-connected lumbar spine disability. That strategy, that's my boot camp. That's what I talk about. I preach it and I teach it. You need a doctor that can help you with a Nexus letter. Check out my med team. Here's an email address. Hit them up. Tell them you need a Nexus. So here's 3 high-value secondaries that you can file a sleep apnea claim for. Sleep apnea secondary to sinusitis, sleep apnea secondary to PTSD, and sleep apnea secondary to a lower back condition. So it works all over the place, and these are 3 that I recommend you checking out. You should check out the BVA at bva.va.gov and review what other veterans have done. It's all about argument. I know you guys don't think it's an argument. It's just roll in there and file some shitty claim and get denied and, oh, that sucks, VA, that you didn't rate me. Be a little more scientific than that. Be a little more legal than that. Go read what other veterans have done because it's going to make a huge difference. If you have any clue what you're doing, you're way ahead of the game. They're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, rule in your favor. Check out my boot camp if you want a deeper dive into the VA claims process. My brain, want to contact me, talk to me on a live Zoom session, any of that kind of stuff, combatcraig.com. You might want to check out Hill and Pondon at hillandpondon.com. They're VA accredited attorneys out of Orlando, Florida. They're also the sponsor of this video.